Good afternoon. We do have a quorum present, and I'd like to call the August 4th, 2015 meeting of the Board of Education to order. We'll begin our meeting today with a Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it
Thank you. Every time we do that moment of silence, I think of the young student who gave us, 15 seconds that one time he was here and told us to sit down. So that's my standard, sorry. All right, looking for a motion on the agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda as recommended by the Agenda Planning Committee.
Second. Thank you. Dr. Hardings, Mrs. Fisher. Discussion on the agenda.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to include under personnel actions approval of the superintendent's employment contract,
The language amendment.
language of the employment contract.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on Mr. Ridenour's amendment to the recommended agenda? All those in favor of the amendment? 7-0, student member concurs. We're back to the original motion, Dr. Hardings, on the now amended agenda. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? 7-0, member concurs. Okay, approval of minutes.
Yes, Madam President, I move for approval of the minutes for the closed session of the meeting held on Tuesday, July 21st, 2015, and of the business meeting that same day, Tuesday, July 21st, 2015.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Second?
Second.
Mr. Ridenour, discussion. All those in favor? All those abstaining? 5-2, member concurs. All right, that takes us to public comment, and we have a very special guest with us today, Amanda Crable. If you'll come forward, welcome back. What's it been, 2 years or 3?
No, I can't. It's been, well, I'll be a junior in college, so it's been 2 years since I graduated. But I came back and visited once before.
You did.
So.
You did. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Amanda Crable. As most of you know, I was the student member on the Board of Education my senior year. I graduated from North High from the IB program in 2013. Right now I attend Gettysburg College, about an hour from here, lovely drive. And when I was on the board, I remember most of the public comment sections were criticisms. And so I wanted to come and tell you guys something happy today. So this past semester, I had the amazing opportunity to study abroad in Mendoza, Argentina from February until June. Some of the best months of my life, seen some of the prettiest sights I've ever seen before, worked on my Spanish a bit, it was great. But while I was there, I did actually take classes at an Argentine university with Argentine professors and Argentine classmates. And we had to write essays and we had to do presentations just like the Argentine students did, but they had to be in Spanish, which was our second language and their first language. And after every single presentation and every single essay, the professors told us, you know, the U.S. students write and present better than any other foreign students and any of my native students. Because in the U.S., we were taught to write and present from a very young age. Think of all those standardized tests we've had to do. How many essays have we had to write? So it's all for something. So the other students, there were students from Belgium, Australia, England, Mexico, all over Latin America, Brazil, and of course the other Argentine students who have been speaking this language their entire lives. They didn't just say this about me, they said it about every single U.S. student. So I want you guys to know, I think it's very important that we are doing two very important things right in the U.S. We are teaching our students how to write and how to public speak. Just thought I'd let you know. I would like to also thank North High and the IB program and its teachers specifically, because they are amazing, and without them, I probably wouldn't have gone to Gettysburg, and I probably wouldn't have gone abroad where I did and when I did. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. What are you studying in Gettysburg? What are you majoring
I have
in?
two majors. One is Spanish, Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino studies, and the other is physics.
That's interesting.
It is an
You're
interesting
looking
combination.
at Dr. Harding's. Why are you doing that?
Well, he has a PhD in applied physics, so.
That he does.
But yeah, it's a liberal arts school, so weird combinations are sort of their thing.
Any other particular skill set that you feel you picked up in your experience here in Washington County Schools that has been helpful?
You know, I do think being SMOB was pretty helpful because you learn a lot of self-confidence and you learn to work with adults who know what they're doing when you were just kind of tossed in there. But you guys are all really great, and you helped me learn when I was here, and I know you'll help Erica learn if she hasn't started already. But yeah, SGA was a huge, huge part of my experience in Washington County, and it helped me in so many ways.
Student government, translating.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from my colleagues for Amanda while she's here?
How do you plan to put your two majors to work?
Everyone asks me that. I actually don't think I want to go into physics. Sorry, Dr. Hardings. I think I probably want to stay somewhere in the area and do some finance, real estate type things.
Interesting.
So hopefully I'll be sticking around.
Very good. Other questions?
Mrs. Brightman?
Yes.
I want to congratulate you as well. I've enjoyed following your trip to South America on Facebook.
Thank you.
You post regularly of pictures of the things you've done. It was fun to follow all that you did.
Glad you liked them.
It looked like you had even a far better time than you've described today. It really looked like you had a great experience.
It really, really was.
Good.
Words do not do it justice. Neither do the pictures, but
That's great. Traveling abroad is a great opportunity for anybody. It really changes your perspective on lots of things, and I think that's really some of what college should be about.
I agree.
And as far as the physics, and people often think physics is very rigid and formulas, but I find, and I think most people who enjoy it find, that it is a very creative field to pursue. It's very intuitive, and that's why I think often there's that strange combination between liberal arts and physics, because they're both sort of based on that intuition and creative approach to problem solving. So I hope you experience some of that. And I was one of 20 physics majors when I was in college.
Yeah.
And I think there are, of the ones that I still keep in touch with, I think there are only 3 of us who make our living in that field.
Yeah.
But I think to a person, the other ones will tell you they're glad that they studied it because of the way it helps them approach problems, think, and after all, isn't that what education should be about?
I completely agree.
So congratulations, and hope you'll come back and let us know again how you do when you graduate or
Thank you.
before.
I will.
Great. Other comments, questions? Amanda, I will say thank you for coming by. It was great to see you, and don't be a stranger. We look forward to hearing your next story, next narrative of your next adventure.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else, excuse me, here today that would like to speak to the board? Okay, we're going to move on to unfinished business. Mr. Trotta, consideration of the second reading of proposed changes to policy IKFA. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. After careful consideration, the Policy Committee recommended changes to policy IKFA. The proposed changes were presented to the Board of Education at its public business meeting on July the 21st. The members of the Board of Education adopted those recommended changes. Since the first reading, the community has been provided with an opportunity to provide comments. We have not received any comments. At this time, the Policy Committee is recommending the approval of the second reading of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. A motion on this policy approval.
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy IKFA, High School Diploma, World War II Veterans. Didn't we change that title?
Yes, there is also a new title to the policy. It has been changed to read High School Diploma, World War II, Korean Conflict, or Vietnam Conflict Veterans. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Okay, very good. We're voting on Mrs. Fisher's motion. All those in favor? Looks like 7-0 with the member concurring. Thank you. Next to the second reading of proposed policy EGAD, plus
Yes.
others. Thank you.
Thank you. During the Board of Education's public business meeting that was conducted on July 21st, the board took the following action. First, it approved the rescission of policies IIBCA, IIBCB, and IIBG. It also approved the adoption of a single new policy, EGAD, to address all copyrighted materials and requirements. Since the first reading, the members of the community have been provided with an opportunity to offer comments. We have not received any comments. We are seeking the approval of the second reading of the proposed changes to the rescissions that have been referenced and the adoption of new policy EGAD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed policy EGAD entitled Copyright Compliance, and therefore to rescind policy IIBCA entitled Reproduction of Copyrighted Materials, policy IIBCB entitled Copyrights, Non-Print Materials, and policy IIBG entitled Computer Assisted Instruction, Compliance with Copyrights.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. A second.
Second.
Dr. Harding's discussion. This is a second read. The vote is on Mrs. Fisher's motion. All those in favor? 7-0. Member concurs. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're on to new business. Dr. Michael, I believe you're going to present consideration of the capital campaign for Williamsport High School multipurpose room addition. Have some guests with us. Welcome, Mr. Kalbaugh, Ms. Bowman.
Good afternoon, President Brightman, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. I'm here on behalf of the Williamsport Wildcat Boosters requesting your approval of two brochures that we provided to the board in their packet regarding naming rights at Williamsport High School. On May 5th this year, you approved an MOU that allowed the construction of a new multi-purpose building, a concession stand, a girls' locker room, team room, and a storage area. That construction is well underway. The boosters have provided their money in advance for the project, but they are in the process right now of collecting some pledges and things. And we're here today seeking your approval of the specific areas in the building as outlined in the large brochure, the next to last page. And it kind of outlines throughout the athletic area, all inside the building, areas that they like to do naming rights. Naming rights areas include areas like the boys' locker room, the girls' locker room, athletic trainer's room, the athletic director room, the multipurpose room, wrestling room, various areas like that for various amounts of money, which are all outlined in the document. The athletic boosters know that they need to be in compliance with the board's naming rights and the expectations of those that we're seeking names for these areas for in the future, and that people will be informed of any restrictions of naming rights and those things prior to accepting their pledge. For the larger donations, we'll be back to the board with specific names that would go in each area and seek your final approval. So today, we're specifically asking for authorization to go out into the community, as outlined in these brochures, to seek pledges and donations towards those areas and potential naming rights. And we'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. This is an action item and requires a motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the distribution of printed documents as described in the supporting letter and flyers regarding the Williamsport Wildcat Athletic Boosters Club Incorporated capital campaign for naming rights for the multi-purpose room addition to Williamsport High School.
Thank you, Dr. Hardings. A second.
Second.
Mr. Ridenhour, thank you. Questions?
Mrs. Brightman,
Yes,
I'll just
absolutely.
congratulate you again on continuing the process. I mean, from the very beginning, when I think we first met to discuss this, you laid out a process of how this would go. I think the boosters have hit every single one of the things that they said they would do. I know that's with a lot of cooperation from our staff, but it's great to have a good community partner and such cooperation. I think the flyer looks like it was very well thought out, well put together. I think it represents who you are, who Williamsport is, and who I hope Washington County Public Schools is very well. And I'm optimistic that you'll get a great response, and we'll continue this project forward and get it done on time, on budget, and really have a great facility for these kids. So thanks for your ongoing support, and I look forward to supporting the.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions from my colleagues? I will offer that we are in receipt of the letter dated July 28th. And in the letter, under number 2, it does mention that no naming rights shall secured or granted by your organization without the prior written authorization of the board in accordance with board policy FF, naming and renaming of facilities and granting of naming rights. And the reason I quote that is I did want the public to understand that there may be another level of authority here, that your organization is fully aware of that, and this organization, this group is as well. We're very supportive of the partnership and want to be very supportive, and I know you're working closely with staff. And to that point, once we finalize this motion and consideration today, the board will be responding to this letter, so you have that on file as you move forward. Any comments from either of you? Ms. Bowman, Mr. Kelbaugh?
Other than
No,
thank you
you're
for all you do.
Your staff's been wonderful to work with, so we're just going to keep moving forward.
Any questions you have about any of the process going forward that you'd like to share with us? Or
It's been great. It's going to be something good for the kids at Williamsport High School. And it's something that's been thought of for many, many years, and we're moving forward, and it's running smoothly now. So thank you all.
Absolutely, thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, we'll move forward to the motion, Dr. Harding's motion. All those in favor of this consideration? 7-0, and member concurs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Akers. Welcome.
Good afternoon, President Brightman, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. I'm here on behalf of Clear Spring Middle School to request the approval of the generous donation of $5,580 from the Leonard P. Snyder Fund. Clear Spring Middle School would like to use the money to purchase iPads for use in their 6th grade English language arts classes.
Very good, thank you. A motion for this action?
Madam President, I move to approve a gift in the amount of $5,580 to Clear Spring Middle School from the Leonard P. Snyder Fund.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that this Leonard Snyder Fund has done just a plethora of good things for the schools at Clear Spring. And I thank the people who continue to see that this fund stays solvent, and it's just been a godsend.
Thank you. Other comments before we vote? Please extend our appreciation, as always.
I will.
Okay. All those in favor? 7-0, member concurs. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the superintendent's report and update.
So I've asked Dr. Pugh, who is our Chief Academic Officer, to come forward today. She's going to spend some time talking about our student achievement. Before she begins, I'd simply like to say to the larger community that we're excited to begin school for students on the 19th. And what you're going to see today is the results of a number of students who have come before those kids who are coming back this year. So with that, Dr. Pugh.
Dr. Pugh, before you begin, would you take questions during your report, or would you prefer to wait to the conclusion?
Let's do it in two halves. We have some data to report, and then we have some information to give. So right after the data portion, if you have questions on that, I'd be happy to answer.
Pause and let me know, and we'll entertain.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update about student achievement and to provide you with some background information about the newly revised SAT, which will be coming out in March of 2016. So for our data from last year, we have our AP exam participation data as well as our performance. You were given this information. You should have it in front of you and in your packet. I'd like to point out some of the highlights. We had more takers, more student takers this year. We had more exams taken by those students, and we had more students passing over the year before. For the distribution of those scores, while we did have more takers, our pass rate didn't increase at the same rate, but we would like to point out that we had the opportunity for more students to participate in a rigorous course of study. In the International Baccalaureate exams, the score distribution shows that there's a slight downward trend in the number of students testing. Having been there last year, I can tell you that that number should rise. We had a larger class following it. We also had more students passing their IB exams with a score of 4 or higher. There was a nice increase in the number of 7s. A 7 is the highest score on the IB exam. It's very challenging to receive, and that went up from 0.3% to 1.5% of that class earning a 7. For our ACT in 2015, we had a 4-year high in the number of student takers. We also had an increase in the scores across the board. This might partly be due to our AVID program, which requires our students in that program to take the ACT exam as part of that monitoring of student progress. It's also important to note that this is their last take, which I'll explain a little more in the SAT. For our senior SAT participation rates, we do not have the state data back yet, but we have our participation. We did have a smaller percentage of our senior class take the assessment in the SAT, but that's possibly because some of those students did take the ACT as well. And we do encourage the test of best fit for where the students would like to go following high school. Some of the colleges accept the ACT as well. So the results that we have at the class of 2015, the SAT critical reading, it's creeping up. That is a number that is very difficult, very challenging to impact in a significant way if you'll look at the trend data over the past few years. So the fact that it's moving up is a positive note. In mathematics, You'll see again a trend up with a score of 519. These numbers represent last take. All of the SAT numbers represent last take. And what that means is that it may not be the student's best score overall in each of the assessment areas in the math or the reading, because it's a very viable option for students to retake and focus on one or more sections of the test. If you did well in the math the first time you took it, you may be going back, studying a little bit more for the reading, go back and take the reading, and subsequently maybe your math might go down because you're going in with a focus really to meet a goal. And in writing, we also showed a slight improvement up to a 482. Even though we have students writing a good deal in high school all the way through, starting in elementary school, this is, again, a very challenging number to impact in the, if you'll notice, the trend data over the past several years, again, has stayed relatively stable. So if there are questions about data?
That's a good stopping point. All right, very good. Questions up to this point?
Brightman?
Dr. Hardings.
Yes. Thank you for the report. I'm going to ask the question that I ask every year, which is, what is the correlation between score on an AP exam and grade earned in a class?
And I'm going to say there isn't one. There's not a high correlation, to my knowledge, in my experience with the courses that I've looked at. I've had teachers who had 85% of their physics class pass the exam with a 3 or higher, but their grades may have varied. And when talking to the teacher, he would say it's about the amount of work that the student's completing on a day-to-day basis in the class. So you could see a student with a B in the class that earns the highest score on the exam. You could also see a student who works very hard, earns a steady B, but who maybe gets the 3 or the 2 on the exam. So a lot of variables. It's not a one-to-one correlation.
But I think I can add to that we have asked the research question of Hanover Research. We have some preliminary data back right now on a school-wide basis that we will share with the board later on. We are now sending the teacher files so that we can see what individual teachers do in terms of the student performance in the class versus their take on this exam. You should have that in October or November of this year.
Okay.
Could have better answered the question then.
Well, I'll be interested to see it because, I mean, what you describe to me sounds like not a no correlation. It sounds like the correlation coefficient may not be 1, but I would expect there would be some correlation coefficient that would be greater than 0.
I think the preliminary data showed that we're at about a 0.5 or 0.6, but that varied between subject area tests. Okay. And so we'll be able to provide a very clear picture of that, as I said, sometime in either late September or October. We're just being very careful with the release of that data for a couple of reasons. Number one, in some cases there are so few takers that it points directly to a teacher, and that's not our intention in terms of a public forum. That conversation we'd like to have as a private forum. But we'll have some data for you.
Okay. And my motivation really for asking it is, if we're telling students that take AP class because it's college level rigor, and if there's a large group of students who are getting A's or B's in that course, but only able to achieve a 1 or a 2 on the AP exam, it seems to me there's some misalignment. And the message we should be sending students is, if we're telling them it's college level rigor, it needs to be college level rigor. So I just leave that as the basis for why I asked the question. I'm not criticizing anyone, just want to be sure that the message we're sending is consistent with the grade students are getting. The second thing, you said that students take the SAT or the ACT based on the best fit for their post-secondary plans. Tell me how we get to the point where that decision is made.
It starts early on with talking to the counselors about where students are interested in pursuing. I know
when-
Jacob is a junior, so it started for me in 10th grade for my own son. I think that what you're getting at is something that we're aware of. We need to start earlier with our students to talk about what their aspirations are so that we can counsel in a way that's not just relying on a single counselor to get the message to all students in the school, but that it's a system approach of helping students get to where they hope to go. And I've been going through it a little bit as a parent, but I also see that there's some steps that we can do earlier to get preliminary information to help students then look at, okay, this is how I'm doing now and where I want to go, what it takes to get there, and the different pathways that are available to make it to what they're hoping to achieve.
Okay.
A big part of it is finding out what they'd like to do. And it's challenging to ask a 9th grader or even an 8th grader, what do you want to be, and have a realistic view of that. But we're going to work on it.
That's why we need great counselors to help them go
Right.
through that thought process. I mean, the reason it grabbed me when you said that is that seems like a fairly high-level decision to make. Do I need to make the SAT or ACT based on what my goals are?
Right.
And it seems to me that decision needs to be made at the end of a process, not at the beginning of a process. And if we don't have the process in place on the front end, then I think we leave the opportunity for a lot of kids to sort of fall through the cracks or not necessarily be making the right decisions for the right reasons. So I think it makes a lot of sense, coming from the Midwest where they use a lot more ACT than SAT, it makes a lot of sense to tailor what you're going to take to where you want to go. But there's a lot that goes into that, and I'm glad we're looking at making sure we provide it.
So, Dr. Hardy, one of the things I would share is that G. DeGracius at Hanover Research sent some preliminary findings. And again, we're not ready to release these publicly, but I would share with you that when they took a look at the average grades in our AP courses, their statement in their key findings is that they're positively correlated with scores associated to the AP exams in all exam course pairings. They thought that the pairings were statistically significant to the 95th percentile level of competence. When they took a look at math and science courses, they tended to be much more strongly correlated with exam performance than with the average grade in their language arts courses, for example. They also talked about what's happening in terms of grade inflation, meaning they're taking a look at a score, looking at the grade, and what they said there was that overall there was no discernible evidence of grade inflation over time. And they looked back at our scores through 2011. But again, we're going to have a much clearer picture within the next couple of months that we'll share with the board.
That sounds like a rich statistics-driven analysis, and when we talk about doing data-driven analysis and decision-making, that sounds like the kind of thing we should be about. So I look forward to seeing it. And I'm encouraged that we've taken the step to find that. That's great.
Additional questions? I do have a few then, if that's all right. Looking at the IB distribution trend, I don't see a page number on it, but how is our enrollment trending at North High on the IB diploma program?
For next year, it will be relatively stable because those students were in the pipeline. We've tasked our IB coordinator with increasing the enrollment in that program. So he's currently undergoing the search for additional students to participate. Our goal was to have more students completing the total IB program, not just the tests. So I can get you more data in the future specifically about how many students, but when I was there, that was a goal of ours to increase it.
I assume they entered the program as freshmen.
Freshmen.
Do you may not have specific numbers, but an idea as to what the fallout is between freshman and junior year? How many people leave the program, students?
Yes, I know that we had 9 leave last year from their junior year or from their sophomore year to their junior year. And they went to a variety of programs, internal programs, technical high school. Just students made the decision that they wanted to pursue differently.
On the ACT, I know that they also give out a college readiness score. I didn't notice that score in this slide. I didn't know if you knew that or had that data. And the reason I ask is I know the redesigned SAT, which we're going to be speaking about in the second half of your presentation, they're instituting a college readiness score going forward. So there would be an additional comparison between those two. And then wrap that around that we're going to need to test our juniors for college readiness and then possibly supply transition courses going forward. And that was state mandated. And I guess my question is, we've been given some choices as to what proxy we can use for that readiness score. It doesn't have to be PARCC. My understanding is it could be SAT or ACT. So I'm just curious how that decision is being made as to what Washington County would be using.
Well, right now, we actually worked on a draft proposal that we're thinking through the options for each of those. So a student who earns a 550 or higher, they're a student who's deemed to be college and career ready. What is the score in ACT? There's a commensurate score in ACT 25.
That the cut scores?
Right. And so what we're doing is working down through those lists and saying, you know, if they meet it through that measure, then we continue to focus through getting our students ready to meet one of those two measures. The supervisors around the state have met, and their feeling is that we will be able to impact the PARCC score, but the PARCC scores haven't been released yet, simply because we haven't had a full years of implementation of curricula that would lead you to success on that. So their thinking is that we will be able to address some of the needs of the students in that college and career ready track through the PARCC, through preparing for the PARCC and revisions of curriculum to address that.
So that junior level test, will that kick in this year or is that next year?
It will kick in for any student who doesn't meet it this year. We'll have a transition course for next year. Those, the plans for all of the LEAs.
So we're using PARCC then at this point to decide whether the student is college ready.
We're using all of the measures available. So if a student has met the 550, then they meet through the 550. If they meet through the 25 on the ACT, they meet through that. Right now, those things are parent provided. So it's not something that we have all of the scores for all of the students, and all students take those two exams. But if they have those, then they have met the criteria. It's the students who haven't taken the SAT or haven't taken the ACT that we need to look at other exams for. And right now, the other assistants, superintendents are looking at each other's plans. We have a webinar coming up next week to share suggestions, recommendations about how they're actually going to address those transition courses and what those agreements should look like between us and institutions of higher ed.
That's interesting. I didn't realize we could have multiple indicators that I thought we were going to have to, the county would have to choose one test and use that across the board. So that's good information. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions? I know Ms. Greenwald is in the IB program at North High, so we look forward to hearing comments about your experience going forward. And you're in the full diploma track there?
I am, yes.
Very good. Should be a challenging year for you.
For sure.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to the redesigned SAT portion of the presentation.
And I apologize, I didn't introduce Mrs. Beth Moore. She is our college and career ready specialist. She is an expert in a lot of the what I'm going to share with you on the SAT, but she's also been really out in the community helping parents understand this. We've had our counselors, our lead teachers, our administrators have attended an MSDE training, a briefing about the changes to the new SAT, and then Beth and company put on a parent informational session that was very well attended about the changes to the SAT, and they plan to continue to do so. So if we have questions, she'll be the expert. So the key changes, they went back to a design perhaps you're more familiar with of having the evidence-based reading and writing have one score, the math have another score. Those two parts of the test together take about 3 hours. That's the standard, what used to happen in the past. And the essay has been separated, and it is an optional piece of the exam, although some colleges will still require. So here's where the counseling comes in to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the students, and that if their college of choice requires the essay, that they do participate. The 8 key changes, they've summarized in some very nice graphics for you that make it easy to remember what those changes will be. And some of those changes include having real-world context for the problem solving and for the critical reading pieces. They will rely more on actual source documents in both science and social studies, and the students will be required to do more analysis and evidence-based reasoning. And that is fully in line with what the Common Core asks as well. So the first key change, no random vocabulary, no just knowing what a word means or picking randomly from a question. It's interpreting the meaning based upon the context of something that they've actually read. Students will be required to answer questions about the meaning of words in the context of something that they've tried to make meaning from. The command of evidence is that they're looking for a greater depth of understanding of what the evidence is from a wide variety of sources, including graphics. It's not just text-based, it's having students interpret things that they would interpret in the real world as a real person, looking at graphs and pictures and infographics and video and not video yet, but making decisions about what the key information is included in each and using that as a support. The optional essay is not opinion-based. It's, again, a much more rigorous type of an essay where they're focused on very purposeful use of that textual evidence. And from what I understand, the question will remain the same, but the texts will vary between administrations of this test. The math is focused on 3 key areas. I had to laugh because when I shared this with the supervisors and we were going through it, my favorite, the heart of algebra, I asked what that was. So Dr. Bishop sent me some problems to work on the heart of algebra because algebra doesn't have a heart. She told me, though, it does have a heart. I apologize, Dr. Hardings. That's the old English teacher in me.
We'll call my field heartless. That's fine.
Not the whole field, but the heart of algebra. I have some problems that I'll work through. The next step is that the problems are grounded in real-world context, as we've been talking. They're authentic tasks, things that real people will do, multi-step and integrated, not separated by content, not easily discernible of what they're assessing, whether it be science or social studies or math. And then the last key change that our students will love is that there no longer needs to be a strategy of only answering those that you actually know, because you used to lose 1/4 point if you had a wrong answer, and that is no longer. So you're only getting credit for what you do know rather than penalized for what you don't know. The score reporting, there are 15 different variations of the reports, a total score, a section score, a cross-test section score, which includes science and social studies, and then the 3 separate tests, the reading, writing, and math, along with the 7 subscores. So there's much more information, and it is much more similar to what the ACT currently gives in terms of information back to the student. It'll be great to be able to get this as an 11th grader and really strategically focus your efforts and time in studying. Which leads me to Something else that came along with the redesign is a free resource. And the Khan Academy has partnered with College Board to put out video instruction that's very interactive. I've gone on and looked at it to help the students prepare for the SAT. So when you get your first 11th grade score back and you go back in and really focus on that particular area, this is a free resource that's available to help students and parents prepare. The PSAT also made similar changes. They have the same changes that we just went through for the SAT, except that there is no essay on the PSAT. So our approach, what we're going to do to help students prepare for this, we've typically given the PSAT in 10th grade and 11th grade. We're going to continue to do that this year in 10th grade and 11th grade. That occurs on October 14th. All of the sophomores and juniors will take the PSAT. This year, we're actually going to also have all of our 9th graders take what is the new 8-9 PSAT, and some 8th graders. We're going to pilot with the PSAT in 8th grade. It's not the exact same PSAT that 10th and 11th graders will take, but it's meant to be at the 8th and 9th grade level. The hope there is that we will have much more information earlier on so that when we're talking about students and preparing students for high school and beyond, that they're targeted and actually have data to work from. So it should help us in our advisement. Additionally, in backwards mapping from being college ready, these are the key focus areas that we'll be working with throughout this whole year with administrators and with our supervisors to really come up with a strategic plan for curriculum and for our students so that they're prepared when they get to this 11th grade test. I would love all of our students to pass the ACT, have a college-ready ACT and a college-ready SAT score. So what we're trying to do is to enhance what we're doing throughout the years so that they are ready. This universal design for learning is a concept about planning for all learners in mind, making sure that you're addressing the needs of the individual student and really personalizing instruction. The response to instruction is a coordinated effort for specifically and strategically what will you do when students either already know the material and need enrichment or need more time with the material and need more support in mastering it. So it's making sure that we're addressing, again, the individual. The professional learning communities that we have in our county, we're going to use as a matter to analyze and use those data to make those decisions about what to do for individual students and to inform the practice, the community of practice. All of the math teachers will be looking at the results and making decisions about what works, what we need to learn more about, and where we really need to focus in the curriculum delivery. And then this whole process is designed to align with the Maryland's Common Core College and Career Ready standards, which lead right into the PARCC exams, which also lead to now the SAT. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I'll just offer one comment. Again, I think this further illustrates why the counseling piece is going to be so important going forward, because if you've got a student who today, say, is a junior, starting their junior year, and they're going to be taking this new SAT come next March, again, depending on what their goals are, as the test is changing, as the scores are changing, that is a lot for a young person to try to digest on their own. So I think a lot of careful guidance would be very helpful as people try to navigate all of these changes. So that's just a comment, and that's...
I am a parent of a junior, so we're working through those same things. I know his PSAT scores. I know what his college of choice needs in terms of an SAT score, but we haven't taken the SAT yet, so.
And you can't take the SAT that they will use to consider admission until at least March.
March, correct.
Right. So that's a complicated process for a young person. For an adult, it is. So.
have a question.
Yes.
For it mentions as a key change for the PSAT is analysis in science and social studies. Will that become a new subsection, or will that be included in English or math?
It comes from the score report, and so because many of the questions in a reading section are looking at an original document that is about history or is about science, your interpretation and analysis of that will create your science or your social studies sub-score, which then calculates your readiness in that category. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
It's an interesting point, Beth, that you make, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are really struggling with grappling is how we've become much more sophisticated using technology at gleaning information out of what were once isolated subject matters. That's just something that doesn't happen naturally for a lot of people, and it is representing a great deal of time and energy taking place in this district right now, helping people to see not only how to teach in an interdisciplinary manner, but how what they teach impacts other curricular areas that may be taught, unfortunately, in isolation.
I'm going to step in if that's all right. I was at the National Conference Boards of Education, NSBA, this past spring, I guess it was. A key topic was relevance, and I think that's something we're hearing in education. Instruction needs to be relevant. We need to connect. There's been a disconnect. And I look at testing, and this came up in a presentation there in Nashville where there were probably 200, 250 educators, Board of Ed members in the room, and the presenter was talking about relevance in testing. So I'm wrapping this around testing. And the point he was making is at the federal level, he feels that the Department of Ed is looking at trying to, and I really hate to say this just to get it started again, but define a test that's more relevant to more students. So for example, he showed in math, we're hitting on math today for some reason, but a math problem from an AP exam. And then he said, out of a room of 250, he said, how many of you could solve this problem? Had a lot of what I would call obtuse vocabulary, a high-level type of question, and maybe 12 people in the room, I was not one of them, raised their hands. Then he showed a NAEP math problem, National Assessment of Education Progress, that has been given since 1969 nationally and internationally, and put it up there, and he said, how many of you could solve this math problem? And almost all of us raised our hands. And he said, those two questions are asking for the exact same answer. One is being asked in terminology or vocabulary that is relevant to day-to-day usage or consumers of math rather than producers of math. And the other one is just almost being made difficult for the sake of being made difficult. And I'm a little biased in how I'm asking this question, I understand, but...
Actually a lot, but...
Yeah, really? Okay. So the question is, if the vast majority of people are probably in their future lives and careers are going to be consumers of math, what real measurement are we making of a student if we make the problem as difficult as the question as difficult as possible when what we're looking for is the solution? And if we say it in a more relevant way, we still get to the right answer. I don't know. There's a question in there somewhere. Is there any response? Do you hear out in the world that NAEP, I know the state of Vermont has never gone to PARCC or Smarter Balance. They've used NAEP all the time for their high school assessments as well as their elementary. It seems to be a well-respected and what I'm going to call relevant test. Any thoughts, comments, throw something at me, whatever?
The purpose behind the redesigned SAT is to address exactly that, to get to the relevance. In recreating that test, they worked with college professors, they worked with business executives and said, what are the skill sets that we want our students to have? And what then is the correlation between what they learn in high school and then how they build on that and apply that knowledge in college. So the ultimate goal is that indicator, that correlation of what students need to come to college with in terms of a skill set, and then how do we design a test that measures those skills that then are that trajectory for students to be successful in today's businesses and in today's careers. So the idea was to make it relevant, to truly test a set of skills, not just a student's ability to solve a complex math equation.
Okay.
And I would just add, that's exactly what we're working on in our development of our formative assessments. These are low stakes for the student, but they are rigorous. They're the most challenging standards that we've identified available, and they're interdisciplinary in nature. So it's not just math in one test and English in another test, but really giving them experiences, tasks, if you will, problems of practice that would require students to apply both math and English skills in the addressing the test. So it is much more. It used to be you taught, and then when you left school, you were able to do. You were to learn and then do. And I think what we're finding and what we're excited about really is that you have to combine the two. It's a matter of doing to learn, and that's exactly how we're designing the formative assessments, to be able to be interdisciplinary in nature. And I think other exams like the PISA exam, which is the international exam, they assess math and science similarly. For example, they had a problem where it was a graph and the graph didn't start at 0. Well, a math teacher would tell you that that's wrong, but a science teacher will tell you it happens all the time. And so rather than having that rub, really talking about, well, when is it appropriate to have a graph that doesn't start with 0? And why would it be something that you would need to be able to interpret? Because it certainly skews what the consumer of information would think if they thought that the access was 0, with how large the scale was. So I think that we're learning a lot about assessment, and we're learning about where are there crossovers and connections so that we can accomplish what we need to do for our students by stitching it together rather than continuing to address isolated standards in isolated courses, all with respect to the content. So.
Thank you. Yes.
I'd actually like to go back to something Mrs. Brightman had said a little while ago about comparing the ACT and the SAT to determine college readiness. Since the SAT is an aptitude test and the ACT is an achievement test, how are you able to compare the two, I guess, effectively against each other?
Again, it's based on the success of students in an entry-level freshman course. So if a student earns a certain score, the 25 is kind of the cut score, benchmark score on an ACT exam, then that is indicative of that student being able to perform in that entry-level freshman course and earn a C or higher and gain credit in that entry-level freshman course. And then the SAT is the same type of correlation where they're saying, okay, it's a 550 on the SAT is indicative of the student's ability to perform in that freshman entry-level course and be successful. So that's how they're projecting that success for the students.
Good. Thank you. Other questions, comments?
I'd just like the opportunity to follow up. I think I think you raise a good point, but I think it also, something you can't lose in the discussion is what's the purpose of the assessment or the test. If you have a student who wants to be an engineer, to go to University of Maryland and study engineering, whether that student can answer that math problem using mathematical language, mathematical processes, and in a real rigorous mathematical way is very relevant. Now, if you have a student who wants to study marketing, or maybe a student who wants to study sociology, or a student who wants to be an English teacher, what you want to assess in terms of their mathematical ability might be very different, in which case the questions that you mentioned from the NAEP might be more relevant. But for the student who wants to study physics at Harvard or MIT,
They need the language.
that college is going to expect that you know the language and can work in the language of mathematics when you arrive.
Absolutely, and that's part of the redesigned SAT and the subscores, is that they have the heart of algebra, but they also have preparedness for higher level math. And so that subscore then would be indicative for those students who are pursuing the physics or the calculus or the medical degree, and that would indicate that that student is ready for freshman calculus versus freshman algebra.
And I think there is certainly value in knowing what functional skills you have in various fields, but since we have at least 3 English teachers in the room, we know that some 75%, and I don't know what the exact number is, but of people who leave high school will never read another novel. It's some very large number who will never read another novel. Now, does that mean that when we take our assessments in high school that we shouldn't put a piece of literature in front of them and see if they can answer questions and respond and interpret? I don't think so. To me, it doesn't mean that we should put a newspaper in front of them and say, you know, can you understand what's in the first 2 paragraphs? I think there is a role for the rigor and the language of the craft, whether it be English, mathematics, science, or history, as part of that assessment process. Again, there's value in knowing what functionally somebody can do, but I think there's also great value in knowing the extent to which an individual understands the language and thinking that go into those different fields. So that's my defense of math for today.
And I knew that was coming, by the way.
She baits me.
I do. It's so much fun. All right, anyone else? No one speaking up for the English teachers here? Okay. Dr. Wilcox, any final comments?
No, I'd just like to thank you for a great report. It was a good discussion to have with the board, so thank you both. And Beth, I should have been the one to actually introduce you. I apologize.
Thank you. We have another report.
Yes, so our second report, we would like to talk to you a little bit about the work that we've been doing to recruit people of color and to improve the diversity of the overall school system. And so Ms. Francisco is going to spend a few moments talking to you about the efforts to date, and she will be open to your questions as well. Laura?
Mrs. Brightman, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board, I wanted to update you as we finalize our plans for our comprehensive training effort that will take place for the next school year and beyond regarding diversity, inclusion, and cultural competency. We have several pieces of this, and I will go through what we have planned. We did conduct research on local, regional, and national trainers and facilitators that were available to us, and we narrowed it down to a few that I will present today. To kick off the year, at our September 17th Leadership Council meeting, which is all of our principals and curriculum and instruction administrators within CES, we will have Dr. Beverly Smith, who is the Associate Superintendent for Human Resources and Equity for Waterloo Public Schools, and her consulting partner, Dr. Denise Shares, who is an Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership at Northeast Iowa University. They will present a keynote address on cultural competency in public schools specifically, and how that focuses on what's best for our students. That keynote address will be recorded. We'll be able to provide it to all of the staff in the district throughout the year. And then Dr. Smith and Dr. Shares will spend the rest of the day working in smaller groups, some interactive training with our administrators. Then beginning shortly after that, through the rest of the school year, we are working with a local consulting firm called Max Life LLC. It's a minority female-owned business. 2 women in particular, Tony Bowie and Sukanya Bora are going to come and do trainings on site with a third of our teachers and a third of our instructional paraprofessionals for the 2015-16 school year. Because there are so many teachers and so many paras, we had to break this down into what's reasonable to accomplish in a given year. So they will be training about 700 people next year at school locations. So we will have people who actually work together, administrators, teachers, and paras, experiencing this training in two-hour sessions. Again, the focus is cultural competency and inclusion. In separate installments, Ms. Bora and Ms. Bowie will also be training our food and nutrition services workers. That's about 225 people here at CES during their regularly scheduled PD days. Actually, it's next week as school gets ready to begin. And then throughout the year, our maintenance staff, those that work here and those that work in the schools. Again, that's about 250 people. So we're really covering a large group of people in the first year. And then to close out the year, at our May 19th, 2016 Leadership Council, we have Howard Ross, who is the founder and chief learning officer of Cook Ross Incorporated. He's the author of several books on diversity. He's been a TED Talk speaker. He's a nationally known consultant. And his focus will be kind of culminating the year, talking about everyday bias and the things that we do unconsciously to, let us know about how we can avoid those unconscious biases. So that address will also be recorded and made available to all staff for the following year or the end of the year if they can fit it in. So that's our plan for 2015-16. It is an ongoing plan because, again, we're getting to a third of teachers and paras. We want to make sure we do get to everyone in a reasonable time frame.
So I think it's also important, Laura, for you to spend some time talking about the fact that while we are trying to make sure that the staff that we have has opportunity to improve their cultural competence going forward, we are also continuing to recruit diverse persons to this school district. And so you might share just a little bit about some of the places we're going and doing.
Sure. That is an ongoing focus. We are continually evaluating our recruitment plan in terms of where we're going to pull in teachers, where we're advertising, what groups are being targeted to bring to the district, and make sure that with this training as well, that this is a welcoming place for our students, for our new staff, whether they're teachers or administrators or paraprofessionals, and looking at historically Black colleges and universities, other consortium job fairs where we have found that there's one in Ohio specifically that I think 13 colleges participate in. And so it brings us a wide and diverse group of potential employees to draw from. And we're reevaluating that constantly to get the best return on investment.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Hirschman.
I just have one question. Sure. How much effort are we putting into visiting and searching out potential employees from like small southern colleges? Because I know that was suggested to me from someone who lives in the South that oftentimes that would be a good place to look because they're looking for something different from where they live.
Well, I always appreciate suggestions like that, and if there's something specific you'd like to share with me offline, that would be great. We are open to any suggestions. We've actually reached out to some of our own faculty to find out where they came from and would it be worthwhile to go there and visit. Our goal is to create partnerships with the colleges and universities so that we're not just appearing for a job fair and then disappearing, but we're building kind of a pipeline that people know they can come to us as a resource and push candidates in our direction gently.
Good.
Well, that's also the point of the HBCUs. Those are historically Black colleges and universities. So whether it's Morgan State, whether it's Grambling, whether it's Southern University, or Howard here, we are attempting to be on those campuses.
Yes, and we have been on 2 of the 4 you just mentioned.
Yes.
Other questions, comments? I would just add, I see this, first of all, thank you. I think this is all excellent. I guess I always wonder, this is a starting point, and I don't think there's ever an ending point on training, on competency and diversity, and I just think that's something we all need to work more at. So I see this as maybe formal training. Do you see any opportunity for informal gathering of our employees, some opportunity for them to interact on a different level and try to find the commonality?
I see some of that kind of already being created, and perhaps not just our employees, but I know there's at least one elementary school that, as a result of the diversity task force that has been in existence now for almost 2 years, they've created their own school-based group, and they're looking at training and activities that they can do at the school level, including community members, not just employees. So I do think there are opportunities that are growing. Some are happening organically, and some we can influence as we go along. And I would agree that I don't know that this training has an end, certainly not a finite end. I think it might change and evolve, but I think there's always going to be a need to address these kinds of issues.
Okay, thank you. Hold your seat.
Right.
Dr. Wilcox, are you completed with your update and reports, or any concluding?
I am.
Okay. And since you're there, we'll move, if no one else has other questions or comments, we'll move into personnel action.
As discussed in closed session this morning, there are several personnel actions for your review and approval this afternoon.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move for approval of the personnel action recommended by staff.
Thank you, Dr. Hardings. A second?
Second.
Ridenhour. All those in favor of Dr. Harding's motion? We have 7-0, and board member abstains.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, according to our amended agenda, we have an item that is about an amendment to the superintendent's contract language. And this is a consideration for action. And we've all discussed this. It's a process that we've gone through, as you would appropriately in personnel in a closed setting. And now we're bringing this forward for action. And so I'm looking for a motion.
Madam President, I move to accept the contract language for the superintendent of schools as discussed earlier.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hardings. All right. Open for discussion.
Mrs. Brightman.
Yes, Dr. Hardings.
I'm going to say a few words about the amendment. This is, just to be clear to the public, this is an amendment to the contract that was approved, I guess it was a month or so ago now. It modifies some of the language regarding the process by which the superintendent and the board engage in our annual evaluation of his performance and setting up of goals and objectives for the school system. This really came out of the superintendent bringing many of these proposals to us. In fact, I think all of them. And to me, it reflects that he was serious when, a month ago, when the board approved his new 4-year contract, he said afterwards, "It is not lost on me that the vote is 4-3. The way I interpret the changes that he's made here is an effort on his part to try to ensure that the board and the superintendent are regularly and routinely having conversations about his performance, about the school system's performance, and about the goals and objectives that mutually the superintendent and the board establish that will guide his work in any year. I appreciate the spirit in which he's done that. I am hopeful that this process will ensure that when we get to the point of evaluating the superintendent formally, which we do every summer, I'm hopeful that there will not be, on his part or on the board's part, any surprises regarding what any individual member or what as a collective body we think about his performance or what he is asking of the board in terms of supporting our goals for the school system. So I want to thank him for being thoughtful and creative and being responsive to what the vote was last month, as he said he would be. I think this process will ensure that we have the kinds of conversations that I think anybody would expect a board and superintendent team to have as they run the school system. I don't want anybody to misinterpret that that means I don't think we've had those conversations in the past. I think we have. This will make that process a little bit more formal. And if that helps all members and the superintendent to feel like the communications that we need to have with each other are taking place, then I think it's a super idea. So again, I thank him for bringing them forward, and I am pleased to support his recommended amendments.
Thank you, Dr. Hardings. Other comments, questions? Okay, I will take a moment to add, I won't repeat or will attempt not to repeat some of Dr. Harding's comments, but I would assure everyone that this was a very collaborative process, a very high-level collaborative process, and there was a need to align the language and the timeline with the new legislation. I do feel strongly that it holds the Board of Ed, the 7 of us, and the superintendent equally accountable. I think it clearly defines the process of the evaluation. As Dr. Harding said, it ensures that each member has an opportunity to express their individual concerns with the superintendent and their colleagues any time during the evaluation process, during the entire cycle of the year. The contract, as always, is in the public domain, so I think also this will be available to citizens, so again, they can see that the process is very transparent and that it clearly aligns the evaluation with the goals and objectives, which are also in the public domain. So those are my comments. Again, I would stress that I thought it was a very collaborative process, and I thank Dr. Wilcox for bringing these forward, and it's something I'm certainly enthusiastic about supporting. Any other comments?
Can I just make one more? There was, if
Yes.
anybody else, I don't mean to cut off anybody else's ability to go before I go a second time.
Anyone wanting to make comments? All right, Dr.
Just one other
Hardings.
thing I intended to add, and this is what happens when you don't write out your comments. Part of the reason that I like these proposed amendments is there are few things I think more important to a school system than stability in its leadership, and I think all you have to do is look down I-270 at Montgomery County to see what happens when you have a certain amount of instability in the school system's leadership. Within the course of just a few weeks, really, maybe months, one superintendent was gone. They were looking for a new superintendent. They were unable to find a new superintendent. And now they're going to be in a situation where between February of this year and July of 2016, that school system, one of the biggest in the country, is going to be without a permanent superintendent. I think that's not a situation that any school system wants to be in. And one of the reasons that I like the structure of this contract is that it, again, will force the board and the superintendent to have the conversations that, and I'm not a Montgomery County board member, but that it doesn't sound like they had until right at the point when the decision had to be made about their superintendent's renewal. So my hope is that with this structure in place, if we get to the end of 3-4 years, it will be clear, I think, to both the board and the superintendent where they stand with each other in terms of their working relationship. And I think that is good, whether this superintendent gets another contract after that or whether the board decides to move on to somebody else to lead the system. I think creating that sort of stability and predictability in the process will serve the community well. So thank you for the opportunity to
Absolutely.
add that.
One last call on comments. All right, we're voting on Mr. Ridenour's motion. All those in favor? 7-0. And board member abstains, being a personnel action. Thank you. All right, moving on to board member committee reports. Ms. Greenwald.
So right now, Washington County Association of Student Councils, we're in like a real stage of brainstorming for the next year. We're really focused on two things right now, which is selecting a fall event, whatever that may be. We're trying to work to choose one. And then another thing is selecting our charity for the year. We brainstorm about 5 to 7 ideas, and then at the first general assembly of the school year, we let the students at the delegation vote to choose who our charity is. So right now, we're just in a process of just brainstorming for the next year.
Thank you. Ms. Harshman, curriculum and instruction.
Since I was unable to attend the last CNI meeting and Mr. Guestford so graciously accepted the position of chair, I'll turn this over for him to discuss the events during that meeting.
Good. While we're speaking with you, do you have anything from MABE or any other committee assignment that you would like to report on?
We will be having our last conference meeting in September to get everything ready for the grand conference down at Ocean City. And of course, all the board members are invited, and hopefully we'll be able to attend.
Very good. Thank you. So, Mr. Guestford, when I get to you, you get to do double duty. All right?
Good.
Ms. Williams, facilities?
Facilities has not met and will not be meeting this month.
Okay. Anything from MABE or the Diversity Task Force or any comments?
Nothing from the Diversity Task Force. I appreciated Mrs. Francisco's report. And Mrs. Harshman has spoken to the fact that we have a MABE Conference Planning Committee meeting coming up in September. Once again, the Planning Committee will be asking for donations of items to be used for door prizes. So anything that anyone on the board wishes to contribute would be greatly appreciated. I know Dr. Wilcox has always been very gracious in providing us with items that have gone very quickly, have been chosen very, very quickly from the table of choices. So I'm sure he'll put together something for us, and anyone else interested in contributing, that would be appreciated.
And I do think in the past years, at least the last 2 years, the Convention and Visitors Bureau has sent a fairly substantial basket as well. You're welcome to give them a call, or I'm happy to do that.
Either way.
They let me know, and offline we'll coordinate that, because they've always been happy to do that.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Mr. Guestford, you have a finance and a CNI report.
I do. Let's start with the CNI. We met this past last week, and just an update on that. Washington County Public Schools is going through a curriculum rewrite for our pre-K to 12. During the last school year, An elementary task force was made by teachers, experts, to identify priorities from all the Maryland College and career standards, and also to develop formative assessment tasks for students. Our teachers have had several professional opportunities to engage in the work, and they are excited. This curriculum will be implemented in the elementary schools first. The new instruction team started this in July and will be working on developing the curriculum for the secondary schools. Also then on August the 5th and 6th, our administrators will begin to learn about the implementation of this kind of structure at the Leadership Council meetings for principals, assistant principals, supervisors, and mentors. I'd like to thank Dr. Pugh for helping me out in getting all this together, and it was a good meeting. For the Finance Committee, we did not meet in July. We will meet in August, and I believe the date I have is the 25th, if that hasn't changed. I think there were some dates that we had changed the last meeting that said there were some things that we may not be able to do. I'm not sure if that was one of those dates or not, but it looks like presently we're going to shoot for the 25th at 10:30 in the third floor conference room.
Right, because the board meeting is on the 22nd in September.
Correct.
Rather than the 15th.
Correct. I just
So
didn't want it to
there's-
conflict with that.
So
but
there's several other options there.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all I have for the
Okay,
two.
very good. Ms. Fisher, I think you have a couple reports.
Actually, just one. The Ad Hoc Committee on Communication met on July 28th. We reviewed and analyzed the suggestions and comments from the work session that had taken place on July 7th, as well as some suggestions that were submitted by Dr. Wilcox. Most of the suggestions were incorporated into the communication processes document. Also, several items from policy GBEE and its regulation, employees' use of social media, along with some items from MABE's publication, Social Media for Board Members, were incorporated into Section F of this communications document. This document will now move to the Policy Committee for some formatting. Likewise, the board norms, which we took a look at and adjusted somewhat or made some recommendations for, will be moving to the Policy Committee for formatting. Both of these will come before the full board for adoption, and it's been recommended that the norms be revisited at each yearly reorganization as a reminder to everyone, as well as for possible changes. Coffee and conversation was a topic that came out of this endeavor also, and it will be moving to the Policy Committee to be added to Policy BD types of meetings, and also brought before the board, of course, for consideration. And finally, the Ad Hoc Committee has recommended the formulation of a board member handbook to be developed either by a new ad hoc committee or perhaps by dividing the construction of this handbook up amongst the board members. At this point, the ad hoc committee has completed its work. We're ready to move on to the next step. Also, I will mention that Policy Committee will be meeting August the 10th at 1:30.
Thank you. Mr. Ridenour, HR.
Yes, ma'am. The HR committee met the 28th, this past Tuesday. During that meeting, we discussed a diversity policy, which will be forwarded to the HR committee for their consideration, or excuse me, to the policy committee for their consideration. We will meet again in August on the 25th at 9 o'clock in the HR Washington room on the third floor.
Very good, thank you. I will take just a short moment to report. It's somewhat under legislative response team, but it's also related to MABE. As all of you know, the Thornton or Bridge to Excellence Act, which has been in place since 2002, part of that requirement of the original legislation was to have a review of it in about 10 to 12 years. after, well, it was supposed to be 10 years, and now we're closer to 12 or 13 years since it was originally put into place. Basically, this is a state-level group, stakeholders from across the state, with a group that has been hired to review. It was the original group from the 2002 Bridge to Excellence study. And the whole reason for this is to rebase the funding formula for education statewide. So this is not a insignificant study. It will basically be the legacy funding going forward for probably the next 10 to 12 to 15 years. And there's absolutely nothing that we get funding-wise from the state that isn't on the table for discussion and review. Part of this final report will come out in 2017, but prior to that, they're sending out some preliminary final reports. One of those is on school size and some recommendations. I'm not going to get into details. I'm happy to share the reports with anyone. I don't want to overwhelm you with very thick reports, but at this point, the group is recommending a $2.5 billion over 10-year competitive grant for school construction, which is very different from the process in place through the IAC and the Board of Public Works that we deal with now. They're not talking about where that money may come from and whether it is a supplant from the $250 million that we've been getting over the years. So that is something I think we need to be very concerned about. One of the things that came to my attention is they recommended that we should have an education facility master plan. And the last time I checked, we already do that. And every district in the state is required to do that. So what I took away from that, plus a lot of other information from a 4.5-hour meeting, is that there does seem to be a disconnect between these recommendations, preliminary and some final, and what is really happening at the district level already. They made a comment that there's no such thing as a fixed cost in education. Every cost is variable, and that the only distinction is that local districts are unwilling to make the hard choices. So I think we need to look at that from their perspective and say, now, what does that look like? And how does that affect formulas going forward? They're also looking at redoing our compensatory aid formula, based again on our free and reduced meal, but there will be a local form to validate that every 3 to 4 years. They're assuming that there will be a reduction in that formula of up to 17%. And they're going to take that 17% and push it out directly to schools, not districts, but schools that have high concentration of poverty. And my concern, and I want to be a little careful how I phrase this, but a lot of their concentration of poverty models seem to be based on urban poverty. And a less realization that there is rural poverty and concentration of poverty in rural areas as well. So one other thing is they're going to totally rework the transportation funding we receive from the state. And I believe about 42% of our transportation dollars come from the state. And before, if you had declining enrollment in your district, you were held harmless. They didn't reduce your transportation because it's a per pupil. They've decided they're going to eliminate the whole harmless. And they're going, so counties that are having declining enrollment will also have declining transportation dollars. Whether those individual students represent ridership or not has not really been put into that conversation yet. And I mean, this, as I said, 4.5 hours, there's a lot of information, but I'll end these comments with, they're making a recommendation for full universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds in public school setting, with an option to include 3-year-olds. So there is an ad hoc committee at MABE that I chair that is tracking what the state group is doing. I would ask for your patience, but I think this is information I'd like to report on as it becomes available. I have numerous documents that I would be happy to send you electronically. I don't want to push it out unless you would like to be aware of it. Let me know offline and I'll get those documents to you. I have shared with the superintendent and staff. So I will keep us in the loop, as they say, as it goes forward. But I do think we're going to see some changes in funding over, and again, this is a 2-year process, so it won't really impact this upcoming budget. We'll start working on in the fall, but the one after that. So, okay, with that exciting report. We'll move on to future agenda items. Again, just to remind everyone, as I did with Mr. Gessford a moment ago, our second meeting in September will be on September 22nd rather than the 15th for that month only. We also, at that meeting, will switch back to our evening hours. But I want to be sure that board members don't show up on the wrong Tuesday. So I'm just going to keep, or staff or the public, so I'm going to keep mentioning it. And other than that, you will see as you get in your weekly packets an update of the overall calendar for the next probably 3 months. All right, so we're going to go to board member, any other reports? Going to board member comments. I've forgotten which end of the table I've started. Somebody's pointing down to Ms. Greenwald, so I'm going to start down there.
I have none.
Okay, Ms. Harshman.
I would just like to say to the upcoming school year that I hope that the teachers and educators have had a nice restful summer and are ready to start. I realize it seems like it's a little early, but it's on its way. And I would like everyone, our new hires as well as our returned staff, that they are greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
No comments.
Dr. Hardings?
Yes, a few comments. First, there's probably a lot of parents and students and members of the community who are going to our webpage for the first time, perhaps since last spring. You'll notice a completely different look, and I know it's been a big hit in our house, and I want to thank the members of the communication team, of course under Dr. Wilcox's leadership, for all they did to revision the way our webpage looks. I think it has a very modern look. It seems to be I think it's easier to find information that you're looking for. I think clearly a lot of thought went into it, and I just want people to notice it when they see it, and again, to thank the members of our team who were involved in making that happen. Second, I got an invitation from Senator Rosapep. You may recall he came and visited Washington County, goodness, about 3 months ago now, and wanted to see some of our creative use of facilities. We showed him downtown, showed him the Barbara Ingram School, talked to him a little bit about the Public Service Academy. I reported on that to the board. He has invited me to come out and see some, what he says are creative use of facilities in Anne Arundel or Baltimore. I think that's going to be next Tuesday. I'm sure any members would be welcome to attend, and if anybody's interested in attending, I'll be glad to forward the information along to you as soon as it's available. Finally, I'd like to thank in advance the Greater Hagerstown Committee for their sponsorship of the new Teacher Academy lunch next week. It's a great way to welcome new members to our community and to our school system. It's great to have them realize right up front that the business community is a big supporter of what we do at Washington County Public Schools. So I look forward to attending that event next week, and I think that's all.
Thank you. Mr. Gessford.
Yes, I have a few things. Attended the summer graduation at South High with my colleagues Donna and Wayne this past month, and Mr. Berman, Scott Berman, did a fantastic job. His staff. Congratulations to the staff that was there and for their service during the summer months when they would probably rather have been off. They did their work, and it was very well attended, and I want to thank him for that. Also want to thank the teachers that are returning for the new school year and to welcome the new hires that will be starting soon. Look forward to meeting all of you. And just if you don't forget, tonight's National Night Out down Boonesboro. I'll be down there with some friends. Smithsburg, Hagerstown, Williamsport all have that, and I hope some of the students can go out and they can meet some teachers while they're there. So that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Fisher.
I have nothing today.
Good. Mr. Ridenour.
Nothing at this time.
Dr. Wilcox.
Just thank you to the board for the amendments to the contract. I appreciate it very much. And we're looking forward to a great school year. I'm not wearing my microphone, so I'll stop.
You took it off. You're doing a Mr. Ridenour on us.
I could only wish.
Oh, all right. I have no further comments. I think I took up my time on the report from May. So we are at the end of our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank